solidarity. We stand for women. Unlike Nancy Pelosi, who wants to trash and attack women, we are together to make sure that everyone are living and feed their families. Yes! The government needs to stay out of it.
My name is Russ Kyle. I give tours, crime tours.
Yeah, Morty. No, she hasn't been out of the house since the blowout. I'm sure, Morty. Yeah, I'm sitting right here. Hey, Morty, put a dime on the Celts tonight. Take the points. Beautiful. Thanks, Morty. I'll see you later. Whew. Nice crib, isn't it? 20 to 25 million in this bloated real estate market. Who'd ever think that a public servant could afford a place like this? But Nancy Pelosi scraped together the down payment.
I don't know what I would have done if ice cream were not invented.
I'm sure hubby Paul Pelosi chipped in, because for years he's been gobbling up prime high-tech stocks like they were chicken feed. Anyhow, I got a little side hustle with my bookie. He's trying to set the odds on the presidential election, and he needs to know every time Nancy leaves the house. Because every time she does, it pushes Trump's odds up. Crazy how that works. Yeah, like usual, the Dems have been mouthing some vague promises about breaking up big tech, all the while raking in enormous donations from the Geek Squad. And the only two Dem candidates who might have really followed through on those antitrust threats were Bernie and Pocahontas. And we saw how Nancy Pelosi scuttled their bid for a spot on the ticket and cleared the way for Biden.
I'm not going nuts. A damn liar, man.
Who will go easily on the techies because he really doesn't know that much about computers.
$2.3 billion worth of, $500 billion in savings and 2-point-something billion metric tons of CO2 going in the air.
Yeah, Nancy's just like the rest of us. She needs a little pampering at the spa day, and why not?
Got hairy legs.
But the vengeful Madam Speaker essentially put a hit out on the owner of this place for showing the world what a hypocrite Nancy is. And now in San Francisco, the only way I can get my spa treatment is out here on the street. Why would anybody want to own a small business in this town? You're lucky if you only get firebombed by BLM or Antifa, because the London breed stormtroopers are coming to shut you down and tax you for the privilege. And it looks like Nancy's protege, Kamala Harris, is trying to rival Nancy in the sheer volume of flesh she had cinched up by the plastic surgeon. But she's got a long way to go to catch up with Madam Speaker. Market Street, San Francisco, once known as the Slot because it cut through the very heart of San Francisco. But it is a double-edged sword. Although it is the most direct route downtown, once on Market Street, it's hard to get off. And now, it's hopelessly impossible to get off of Market Street. There are no cars these days shuttling excited kids to the movies, or mom to shopping at Macy's. Now Market Street is a sad gathering place for lost souls and buses filled with reluctantly essential riders. Oh, and nervous cops who watch from their slowly rolling cruisers. Behind me you see the Civic Center Plaza. That is the focal point for all the hard drug activity in this drug-infested city. It's an open-air bazaar of opiates and methamphetamine that is distributed from bigger fish to smaller fish, who then fan out to the streets to ply their wares to the smallest of fish. The San Francisco street junkie. It's a vile and pathetic system of despair that has been devised and administered by a Democrat-run city hall and their leftist comrades over at the Hall of Justice. The failed sanctuary city policies enacted by previous Democratic regimes can be seen in all their glory right here on this rotting, festering hellhole of a corner in the Tenderloin. Juvenile illegals from Latin America are trafficked onto these streets to hustle the dope to red-blooded American junkies. And all are enabled and protected by a diabolical system dreamed up by power-hungry liberal Democrats. It is a bit of sweet irony that the victims and beneficiaries of these policies have chosen the sidewalk in front of the University of California Hastings Law School to dishonor the world with their very presence. Because, you see, it was Hastings and many other institutions of academia that have promulgated these restorative justice manifestos, which have so badly degraded our society. This piteous display is proudly trumpeted by the leftist elite as doing the work.
One is adopted.
To deal with systemic racism and putting an end to the school-to-prison pipeline. During her term as district attorney in San Francisco, presidential wannabe Kamala Harris lorded over this miasma of Marxist malfeasance. While this sanctuary city structure of managed decline was built from the ground up under Kamala, she chose to pad her prosecution stats with easy-to-plea pot cases, primarily coming from the African American community. And it should be noted that the renowned feminist, Ms. Harris, casually glanced the other way while a constant stream of underage girls from Honduras and El Salvador were routinely trafficked over the border and into barbaric prostitution cartels right here in a sanctuary city and progressive utopia, San Francisco.
This is not about being compassionate, and frankly, this is not about that movie Pretty Woman. Go home and
Perhaps the divine Ms. H remembered how effective the bartering of one's own flesh could be in climbing the ladder of success in a socialist system based on race and identity. San Francisco's always been a party town. Now it's a one-party town in a one-party state, and it has been that way for a long time. But there have been strong independent voices who have been influential in staving off the plunge into the abyss that we are experiencing now. I was lucky enough to sit down and talk to one of the finest of these independent voices, Quentin Kopp. I asked him about the state of politics in San Francisco. You've seen the quality of life go down in the city here. We've got a district attorney who won't prosecute any of this. Needles, and the whole state's on fire.
Next, had a gender reveal party turned deadly Thursday.
Nobody's taking any accountability here.
They are all Democrats, and the supervisors today are sociologists. And they're intelligent. I don't decry or disparage their intelligence, except their intelligence is directed towards socialism.
Before progressive socialism took power in San Francisco, this town had a fairly large number of people who believed in God. Yeah, I know it's crazy, but if one was to run for office in San Francisco, they would have to win a preponderance of votes from these very potent, religiously affiliated voter blocs. And this beautiful church was the center of a powerful political force, essential for victory in any municipal election. This is the very church where the Yankee Clipper, Joe DiMaggio, wed the love of his life, Marilyn Monroe. The individual sect of Catholicism that this church belongs to is the Salesians, who have a particularly sinister and shameful history of deception and abuse that has destroyed the lives of many who have enjoyed this playground. When allegations of Catholic priests and rampant child sexual abuse came to light in the 90s, The Catholic Church, and specifically the Salesians, wasted no time in lawyering up big time. The Archdiocese hired some of the toughest and most tenacious law firms it could find to fight these damaging allegations. Large and powerful SF law firms like Cooley, Godward, and McCutcheon Bigham were greatly feared in legal circles because of their ability to erode and eventually destroy the reputations of the victims. When Kamala Harris ran for DA in 2003, she promised voters she would not exceed $250K in donations. But she goes ahead and accepts big donations from these law firms and many other individual lawyers representing the church, thus blowing that campaign promise right out of the water. Incumbent DA Terrence K. O'Halloran had teed up a comprehensive case of abuse victims, ready to go to court and battle the church. But this late infusion of cash enabled a miraculous come-from-behind victory for Kamala. She then locked up Halloran's case under seal and shamefully refused to prosecute church pedophilia any further. During her tenure as DA from 2004 to 2011, San Francisco became the one and only major metropolitan area of the entire U.S. to fail to prosecute even one single case of child sexual abuse against the church. That's a streak of corruption as impressive in its depravity as is the greatness of Joe DiMaggio's 56-game hitting streak, which will never be touched.
She lied in her campaign for district attorney in 2003. She signed that written oath to spend no more than $250, and she'd violated the anti-corruption ordinance. She spent over $1 million to defeat Terrence Halloran.
Relax yourself, let me take control. Close your eyes, my soul. My eyes are closed. Murder was the case that they gave me. 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 I'm fresh about my cone. I got my mama and my daddy.
Since Black Lives Matter has come to prominence, we've heard a lot about how blacks are being systematically targeted for murder by the cops. That talking point of BLM and their partners in Antifa has been thoroughly debunked by easily obtained crime statistics. And what you've got to remember when looking at these stats is race proportionate to population. Every decision we make in our lives is based on computation of odds. For the cops, that computation sometimes has to be made lightning fast. What is truly commendable is that our all-too-human police force goes into these potentially deadly encounters knowing full well of these stats and ever come away with a positive outcome. If you add to this scenario the alarming trend in armed and unarmed suspects violently resisting arrest, it's not surprising that there are sometimes deadly encounters. On Saturday, April 10th, 2004 at 9:30 p.m., undercover SFPD officer Isaac Espinoza and his partner, Officer Barry Parker, encountered two suspicious individuals standing on the sidewalk of a dark street. As their unmarked Crown Victoria slowly approached the suspects, it appeared that one of the men might have a gun. One of the suspects quickly walked away, leaving the one suspect, who was wearing a large pea coat with the object underneath that had aroused the officer's suspicions. The way he touched the object and then quickly turned away from the cops spurred on Officer Espinoza to get out of the car and investigate. Espinoza identified himself as police and shined a flashlight at the man and ordered him to stop. The man started walking and yelled back twice that he had no identification. He then turned and pulled out an AK-47, from which he fired a dozen rounds, 2 striking Espinoza and 1 wounding Parker in the leg. Espinoza, an 8-year veteran of the force, died later that night at SF General. Suspect David Hill, a longtime member of the notorious West Mob gang of Hunters Point, was quickly apprehended. District Attorney Kamala Harris shocked and enraged the grieving city 3 days later and announced she would not be seeking the death penalty. The rage was voiced at Espinosa's funeral on April 16th, when Senator Dianne Feinstein rose before the congregation at St. Mary's Cathedral and declared, "This is not only the definition of tragedy, it's the special circumstances called for by the death penalty law." Not even Di Phi could change Kamala's mind that she would insist on sparing the life of David Hill. Well, as she said, she ran on the platform of no death penalty, and this one time she kept her promise. No movement yet on the betting line for Trump and Biden. This one might come down to a pick'em, even with the disgraced Kamala Harris on the ticket. Shows you what you can do when the fake news is on your side.
Hip hop. Cardi B.
Think back to George Floyd and wonder if all BLM and Antifa really wanted was police reform. Why did they choose violent street riots as their means to an end? The entire country, including the cops, was literally on their knees at the feet of BLM. If BLM would have sat down peacefully with the powers that be, they could have shaken them down for everything. But they chose burning and looting. And can you blame them? That's what the Dem leaders told them to do. It looks like Dems like Nancy and Kamala wanted chaos in the streets as a way to bring Trump down. So we see Kamala Harris has had a litany of dubious achievements while district attorney in San Francisco. We at the Crime Tour encourage you to show up at the polls and consider the consequences of a ticket consisting of a lifelong corrupt politician with no achievements to speak of. Teamed up with a VP candidate
I do not believe you are a racist. It was actually very
who has shown to be even more craven and prone to accepting
you talk
influence
about
for
the
political gain.
reputations.
But that's national politics, where the fact of the matter is, folks, this time around you've got yourself a real choice. But here in San Francisco, not so much. We know the party, the ideology, and the choice.
I do not believe you are a racist.
Oh wait, what we do know is that there's always another crime just around the corner.